ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Ever since a beef Wellington was used for murder, I've been wondering, why does a mushroom have the ability to kill humans? Sure, no one wants to be eaten, but how will the message about your toxicity get out if all the witnesses are dead? And if fungi can do that, then what else can it do? Anne Jones here, investigating mushrooms. Search for What the Duck and look for mushrooms. Find it wherever you get your podcasts or on the ABC Listen app.
ABC journalist Adele Ferguson has spent months exploring Australia's childcare industry, and her findings have been simply devastating. She's exposed a broken system where profit has so often come before the safety of children, where the most vulnerable have been abused and mistreated. Today, Adele, on her latest Four Corners investigation into how paedophiles are infiltrating childcare centres and why it's so much worse than we ever thought. And a warning, this episode contains distressing content. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Adele, this is a pretty tough story to tell and to listen to, that's for sure. But it is vitally important, isn't it? Because there's something fundamentally broken about the childcare sector in Australia, and you're really urging people not to look away, aren't you?
Absolutely. It's a really hard story to watch and to tell because we're talking about predators who are preying on our children. But we really can't turn away because we really need to know what's going on and how pervasive they are.
Yeah.
You know, there's 1.5 million children go to childcare every day, and the public doesn't have any idea how bad this situation is.
Yeah. All right. Well, now you've gained access to 200,000 pages of New South Wales childcare files that have until now been kept from the public. You've also been looking through court documents, you've been talking to whistleblowers, and all in all, you've come up with a very disturbing picture.
We have. We've managed to find about 150 childcare workers who've been accused or convicted of sexual abuse of children or inappropriate acts. And when you put it into perspective that less than 1% of predators are convicted, because the hurdles are so great because we're talking about children and some of them are pre-verbal, they don't know, they're asleep. It means that there are many thousands that have got away with it out there.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Okay, now the figures are completely shocking. One of the worst cases that we know of course, was that of Ashley Griffith. Now, you spoke to the AFP specialist who managed to expose his case. That's Drew Viney. Just tell me about him and what he told you.
Yeah, so he headed the AFP's National Victim Identification Team, which is a unit in the AFP that actually looks at these terrible videos that pedophiles upload to the dark web, and they freeze frame them to try and find clues of who the child might be, who the worker or the predator might be, and are there any clues to that? In this case, they found blankets that had been manufactured in Queensland. Drew went to dozens of childcare centres in Queensland, knocking on doors, trying to see which childcare centres had these blankets so they could then close in on who this childcare worker might be. That's how they caught Ashley Griffith.
He was someone who I remember sitting in an interview with him after his arrest and asked him outright, how many children do you think you've abused during your time in childcare centres? And he said straight away, 100 children. I thought he was exaggerating, self-aggrandising. Unfortunately, the inquiries that led after that showed that he wasn't exaggerating. All of his victims were 2 to 3 year old girls.
And by him knocking on those doors, he got to see just what's going on in childcare. He got a bird's eye view of what's going on, and he was pretty horrified.
Yeah, and he was shocked, Adele, that the childcare centres themselves and the staff there had so much confidence in the systems that they actually have in place.
Absolutely. He said they'd swear black and blue that there was proper supervision, and what they were talking about could not possibly be that childcare centre. And what the court case also found was that with Ashley Griffith, he was able to set up tripods in the childcare centres and in some cases abuse kids for 15, 20, 25, even 30 minutes, and nobody saw anything.
The videos later showed that he acted with complete impunity. And that's what does surprise me and concern me, is that the ratios aren't what they should be, especially given the amount of money that is provided to childcare centres, not only by the government, by the parents who are funding the operations.
Oh my gosh. All right. And this is just so heartbreaking and life-changing for the families involved, of course, and our heart really goes out to them. You've spoken to a mother of one of the children that Griffith abused.
What this mother said is it's a life sentence for the family and the child. And it really is, because that happens, some terrible thing happens, and they have to live with it for the rest of their lives, which is just incomprehensible to even go there.
For a long time I didn't blame myself at all. I thought, well, I did what every other mother does and got back to work and put my child in care and trusted that people were looking after her appropriately. But as the years have gone on, I do blame myself, and I do wish I had made different life choices.
And she said there was, conclusive evidence that her daughter had been a victim of Griffith, because what he'd done was catalogue all the victims and put them on video.
All right, well, Adele, Griffith is serving a life sentence in Queensland with a non-parole period of 27 years. He's actually still to face trial in New South Wales. Now, that's a horrifying case, of course, but the concern now, Adele, is that you have uncovered so much more. So what have you found?
Yeah, so we found almost 150 alleged or convicted child sex abusers linked to childcare. 42 of them are convicted, and there's actually, right now, there's 13 from childcare facing charges around the country, which is really hard to comprehend. 13 childcare workers are facing charges for some horrific offences, and they include the 26-year-old Joshua Brown, who's accused in Victoria of 70 offences.
Gosh, okay. And you've spoken to many parents across the country who say their kids were abused, but their cases never went anywhere.
Yeah, so that's one of the problems here, that less than 1% of cases ever get convicted, less than 3% ever get charged, and so many of them get away with it. And in this case, the child was abused. The mother realised when one day she was in the kitchen with her daughter, and the daughter said, "I don't like this educator because he touches me." And he told her not to tell anyone. And that's when she knew that her daughter was being abused. She went to the police, she went to the centre, and because her daughter was so shy and couldn't actually articulate what had happened to her, the case went nowhere.
They focused a lot on the fact that the educator was quite popular with the parents. But we get great reviews about him. The parents love him. We called the police. It's a difficult story. She's not going to tell it to a couple of grown men that she's never met before. I want to be able to tell her I did everything I could. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I handed you over to him.
And Adele, you also came across a case where the workers at the centre were only women. Just tell me about that.
Yeah, so this was a particularly disturbing case where the child knew she was abused and was acting it out. Who was the educator? It had to be a woman because there were only women in this centre. And we don't normally think of paedophiles as women.
Well, Adele, we do know there are, of course, thousands of fantastic childcare workers and great centres across the country. And, of course, there are rules. There's rules about staff-to-child ratios, workers having to meet working with children checks. So how is it that these people are falling through the cracks?
Yes, because what we found is time and time again, childcare centres getting breached for not having the right childcare staff ratios, poor supervision, not having working with children checks. So we found 700 cases of workers not having their working with children checks, or they were expired, or they were missing, which tells you that it's very loose. Record keeping was very messy. Some childcare centres just didn't have enrolments or who the educators were. So when you've got this sort of system where it's so lax, things fall through the cracks and these predators can worm their way in.
Now, you spoke to Michael Burke. He is a global authority on this, and he is deeply worried about what's going on here in Australia.
He is the mind hunter of pedophiles. He set up the US Marshall Behavioural Analysis Unit, and he's interviewed 1,200 pedophiles, including 3 in Australia. So he's helped, the CIA, FBI and Australian authorities to profile and catch predators.
Predators don't have horns and speak monster. They are like you and I. Their interests are kept in a very secretive, deviant compartment, and it's very easy to miss.
I asked him the question, why childcare? And he said, predators, they're like fishermen. They go where there's a lot of fish and there's a lot of children in childcare, and when there's not a lot of supervision and the regulation isn't strong enough, it's a perfect hunting ground.
Once they find somewhere where the rules aren't enforced, or a system like childcare where people are getting away with all kinds of things, that goes viral in pedophilic networks. That information immediately goes out and it's shared with like-minded individuals, and they start gravitating to these places.
So just tell me, what is actually being done to fix this?
So state and federal governments have been coming out talking about reforms. Just recently, the New South Wales government passed legislation to increase penalties when things go wrong. The federal government has said that there needs to be a more coordinated approach to working with children checks so that it's continuous, because right now it can be reviewed every 4 years, which is crazy. People can hop from state to state, so they're trying to streamline that better. They're doing things like piloting CCTV in about 300 or so childcare centres around the country. And the federal government has said because they spend $16 billion a year in childcare subsidies, they're going to start using that as a lever, saying that if a centre is bad, they're going to pull funding. And the problem for parents is these reforms that the governments are making just don't go far enough yet. There needs to be a National Childcare Commission at the very least, and there needs to be a real scrutiny on the for-profit centres, because the data we found with those 150 people is 80% were in the for-profit sector.
Okay, but for now, Adele, what would be your advice to parents? Because let's face it, childcare is a reality for so many Australians. They have to have it.
That's right. So for parents, there are a few things that you can look out for. One of the first things I would do is have a look at who owns the centre. Is it for profit? Is it non-profit? And that's not saying all for profit are bad. It's just sometimes these big chains can be the worst offenders. I'd also have a look at the staffing. Is there a lot of staff churn? Are there a lot of new faces all the time? Are there a lot of casual staff? Because that's when things can go wrong. I'd also have a look at the rating and when was the last time it was rated. And I'd also teach my child about correct names for body parts, and child protection.
Adele Ferguson is an investigative reporter with the ABC. You can watch her report tonight on Four Corners, that's at 8:30, or on iView. If this episode has raised any issues for you or anyone you know, Lifeline is one service that can help. You can call 131114. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed and Sam Dunn. Audio production by Cinnamon Nippard. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. ABC News Daily will be back again tomorrow. Thanks for listening.